Welcome to the Linen Suit and Plastic Tie podcast. This is the podcast where we work to dissect and analyze and investigate and explore the amazing, the epic, the awe-inspiring, the cool, the impressive, the awesome power of storytelling and learn how to harness that power in our everyday lives. I'm Gorav.
And I'm Kevin.
Kev, coming to you from Philadelphia. You know what's wild? I miss LA a lot. Obviously, this is probably the longest I've gone. It is the longest I've gone since 2016 with not being back in Los Angeles. And I've been thinking about LA a lot, and even more so because of this goddamn 2026, 2016 trend where like I moved to LA in 2016. I was 17 years old. I started school at UCLA. I know you had a similar experience.
Yeah, and then UCLA, of course, topped up this trend with the 2016 UCLA trend, which was our freshman year. So,
and I'm like, what are you doing? Wasn't that 5 minutes ago?
Yeah.
So you're talking, it hasn't been 10 years, but I'm 27 now. And I moved to this country at 17 and I started UCLA. And I'm like, wow, I guess we're coming up on that decade. And especially because I'm back in school. 10 years later, I'm in school again. I'm taking classes again. I have homework again. I have credits again. I have class schedules again. It's so weird, to be like, oh yeah, it's been 10 years, but I'm back in school learning things. And we've talked a little bit about if you we're coming off of our hiatus right now and returning to season 5. I think that's what we decided. Returning to season 5 of the Linen Suit and Plastic Tie, and it's been really hard to balance this show with all the new priorities I have in my business school. But I think this is an interesting storytelling point too. This 10-year trend people are doing, 2026 share 2016 photos. I think it's so important that we stop and do that, because I'm definitely one of those people. I talk about this in therapy where I fight, work really hard, hit a goal, achieve something that I was scared about. And then as soon as it's over, I don't even think about it. I'm like, oh, what's the next thing? Oh, that was simple. Someone's done it before. But my therapist always reminded me, wait, that's a win. Like, you've been working towards this to this point. That's a win. Take that win. And I think when we take a second to do these like 10 years earlier thing and say, look at 2016, it is so important to take the win and be like, look what you did in these 10 years, right? 10 years is a long fucking time. Look what you did and celebrate that. So I really encourage people in this trend, whether or not it's still a trend when this comes out, but in this trend, not only to say, oh, look at all these photos from 10 years ago. Look how baby I look how young. Oh my God, I'm so old. But like, take a second and say, hey, what are like 10 things that you accomplished since then that person would be in awe of, would be incredibly impressed of, would make that person smile?
Also, as you were talking about being in school as well, even though that college era has been a little bit of distance away from us, it didn't mean we have stopped learning. You and I, on separate occasions, have tried to learn new languages on Duolingo, which at this point, you're obviously sticking it for way longer than I have. Je ne parle pas français. If I said that wrong, then I can't speak French.
What did you say? I think you were trying to say je ne parle pas français.
Yes.
What did you say?
Yeah. I was trying to say that I don't speak French. And if I got it wrong, then that I don't speak French.
I was just in France, so I had to say a few times je ne parle pas français. And it's something I haven't said in a while. So like I mixed it up a bunch where I was like, je ne parle français. So I forgot the pas and there's stuff like that. And it was funny too. I took French for 10 years of my life when I was a kid. I really retained really nothing of it. And I have actually been interested about picking it up again. But the thing I noticed in France is like when I would try to like speak in a different language, I would default to Italian, which is really funny because I've been taking Italian on Duolingo for like a little over a year now. Been little bite size, even though I was in France, even though I took French for 10 years as a kid, it's in there. Even though I probably still know more French than Italian, I would say instead of oui for yes, I would say si all the fucking time by mistake. And I'm like, what am I doing? French is more core to me. Why am I saying si?
And I'm the reverse because I started French first. When I tried to do Italian, I realized I sounded to myself like I was speaking French.
Yeah. And it's this thing with AI where some people are like, well, with AI, why would any of us need to learn new languages? Because there'll be automatic dubbing and like things like that. And language learning it has so much less to do than like conversing with someone functionally than you think. Like it's so much more about the way we phrase things. We learned this in sociology back at UCLA. The way we phrase things, the language we have access to, the word choice we have access to, the words we know often shape our existence, right? It shapes what
Mhm.
matters to us. Even with this ability for shows and movies and things to travel across the globe at rapid speeds without needing to learn their language, we are still very different people. We live different values in different cultures. We're not in a world of a homogenous culture. And that's why learning language, even in the world of AI, is good. It's still incredibly important because it helps you gain that lens and it helps you enhance your life in a way that's like just by learning these words, learning how to communicate, learning the culture, even if it's not fluent, like 5% more, it can be incredibly enriching in understanding a different point of view. And that's storytelling. Story is in language.
Yeah, it has, I think, has really highlighted the human touch and what that means and who's really trying to put in the effort to do that. The way people communicate have changed because you notice you have an internal radar that helps to detect, if something someone is communicating from themselves or employing an AI tool, and people can tell. And especially when it's done in a not so eloquent way, you can really notice that.
Recently I got called out on LinkedIn for a LinkedIn message. I sent someone a LinkedIn message and they're like, I didn't read the above because it's clearly written by AI. So the telltale sign was there were M dashes. I think when I read it, I'm like, yeah, it looked like AI was involved. I didn't care, to be honest, because I was like, it was like 2 free sentences that I had written and just had it edited by AI.
And I think for you, it's like how you use Grammarly, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
trying to edit your message, but in this case, your tool or editor has its unique styles that's very recognizable. But I think this is a great example of the lessons we've been emphasizing on our show, and we keep trying to remind ourselves is that you need to think about your audience,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, and your audience owes you nothing, as we like to say. So
Mm-hmm.
when we are trying to get our message across, we need to understand how they might be received and how do we communicate in a way that is digestible for the recipient.
I think that's a huge point you just made because, yeah, I even put it was actually a little bit more effort. Instead of just sending it, I threw it in an AI just to edit it. And then I would use it for, especially when you're networking in B school, looking for jobs, looking to connect with people. You send, like, I am booking so much right now. I'm booking this podcast. I'm booking a conference in New York. I'm booking another podcast. I am networking for jobs. I kid you not, when it would be a light day to send 100 LinkedIn messages out a day because I'm booking for so much and I have so many different uses. So, like, yeah, AI speeds that up. And it does bring that to that conversation of like, where do you draw the line? What's too much? What's too little? And I'm struggling with it. I really am. And I think, Kevin and we were having this conversation recently about my LinkedIn posting as well, like just to get really critical on me. Um, um,
It was more of a academic research,
no,
I
and
would say.
like if you want to if you have it on top of your head and you want to kind of go through the phases you mentioned, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think there was basically this one recent LinkedIn post by Gorav that really ticked me off in some way, I guess, where I went, okay, this looks really interesting. I wonder how differently you sounded, 3 5 years ago when we didn't all start employing AI our day to day. And so I really went back and scrolled through all of your posts over the course of the past 3 years, and you can really tell distinct phases where things really sounded like you. I would expect that post to be a text message, let's say,
Hmm.
come directly from you, and versus there's an in between phase, I would say, where we were really getting much better at understanding what we wanted to share with the public about our new episodes. That phase where you had your best work, where you started off your post with an interesting lead-in question, and then you went on to explain what this new episode is about and why it can be interesting for you to listen. And then at a certain point, you'd really just start noticing that there are more bullet points than complete sentences and passages. And that makes it harder to follow when you're a reader, even though there's more blanks and fewer words on the page. But what makes it harder is that there's no complete sentences. So it's harder for a reader to follow a train of thoughts because their eyes have to keep skipping down. It's kind of like a PowerPoint. Reading a PowerPoint, when you know, like, you're supposed to also have someone talk through those bullet points for you. That didn't seem to be sufficient information on its own. So I think sometimes we definitely, especially if you're someone who use these new tools a lot, it's also important to go back and read the stuff you edited and, just do a second pass and see if it still makes sense and what might seem off, and then how to further adjust it from there. So I think, especially in this day and age, that's something that could be really beneficial.
It's interesting because like the bullet point frame is like a LinkedIn frame. Like it's a framework people give you, and I have been trying to adopt it more. Have I been using it too much? I write everything and I purge it into a ChatGPT or a large language model, all these thoughts, and then I have it edited and I work with it. These take a lot of time. And I always just kind of word vomit and I say what I want and I frame it and I play around until I have a post that looks like it has good content and it's in a LinkedIn format, right? I always write stuff out, work with it, ask it to put in my words, whatever it thinks my words are. But you're right, is that working? And I think one big thing is I have such insecurity about my writing. As you know, I don't consider myself a good writer. People who text with me know my grammar is shit. Everything's full of typos. That's why the LLM really helped unlock this thing where I can write because it will fix some of these gaps. But it's tough because I don't know where that line is.
We are also the recipients of a lot of these cold messages as well. Mm-hmm. And we have also gotten messages where clearly you can see they are AI edited, if not AI generated.
Does that bother you? Because it doesn't bother me.
There's a part of me that writes them off pretty quickly the moment I noticed that. And I couldn't always pinpoint what it was because, on the other hand, I know that it does show them trying to polish their writing too. So if that shows me their effort, I shouldn't be ignoring these messages. But as we were talking through this, I'm realizing that maybe the part of it that makes it difficult for me to comprehend is that I don't know how this person sounds anymore. So I think sometimes I can get an outreach that's in poor grammar because there's a lot of times where people don't speak English as their first language either. But I can see the sincerity. I can see their intention and that they really would like to see help. They're willing and eager to learn. That allows me to look past the details and the syntax. But when a message is so heavily edited in such a way, I don't know who I'm talking to anymore. I don't know how you sound, especially when you're a stranger. So there's a gap in that sense of trust where I can't really articulate it, but I'm not sure who I'm talking to.
So the trust thing is interesting. The trust thing is interesting because I think I assume good intent with most people. Anytime anyone reaches out to me on LinkedIn for a coffee chat, I try to do it every single time because I understand that where they're coming from. Like, I have no issue if you use AI to edit it because I don't have any qualms with this idea of you don't have to put in that much work to message me because that's how the internet works. Odds are, the odds are I'm not going to respond. I message hundreds of people. Vast majority don't respond. I don't want to live in a world where that person spends 7 hours crafting a message to me, and because I am busy with exams that week or I'm out of this country, that person wasted 7 hours of their life. I'm perfectly okay with being one of the 100 people they message, and then that's cool. Like, they thought out of all the people online, I should be one of the 100. That's awesome. And then we have that conversation, because when I build a connection with someone, a mentorship relationship, a podcast relationship, whatever it is, it's never because they had the most eloquent first message, right? It's because of the relationship that built from there. I don't know if the people who can write the most eloquent first message should be the only people that get elevated, because
Yeah.
it's just another place for bias, especially against people who don't speak your language as your first language. To be clear, I do. It just sounds like English isn't my first language. It is. I'm just bad at it.
Well, my point was that the lack of eloquence doesn't matter sometimes. And
Yeah.
I think it's actually the reverse, is that chase after eloquence that is driving people to heavily edit their messages, and at some point you tip over the scale and your messages lose a bit of that human touch, and that can be off-putting for another human being who have this inexplicable radar for whether they're talking to a human being or not. Because at the end of the day, we are trying to establish human communication and connection. I think there's something to be said about making sure you're not losing that intention in the message that you're sending over. And even before AI, there are days where we send hundreds of messages, just handwritten. Obviously copy and pasted, but handwritten.
Yeah.
So, that part of cold messaging hasn't changed.
Anyways, it's a complicated question. And that's some of the key reasons why, even in this age that chatbots are taking over, I am even more convinced that this work we do is really important. Kevin, who are we talking to today?
Well, we have brought up great learning tools here and there between Duolingo and Grammarly and Gorav for you. When we did our annual trip together, you were glued to your phone, and I was really confused what you were doing. But then I realized you were playing chess, which is, I guess, a new obsession for you, and another skill or game, if you will, that you've been learning over the course of past year. And so this week, we are talking to someone who has accelerated the growth in all these things. Albert Cheng, he is the Chief Growth Officer at chess.com, is one of the largest online chess platforms for chess players from beginners all the way to the grandmasters. He has also worked in pivotal roles for Grammarly, Duolingo, with pretty distinct brand stories. So, without further ado, let's hand the floor to Albert.
Hello, how do you do? Sit down, gather around. We've got stories about stories that'll mix you a drink of wonder and mystique. 'Cause life can be dry, better dressed for the times with the linen suit and plastic tie. Linen suit and plastic tie. Now here's Gorav and Kevin.
So, Albert, welcome to the show. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What is your story?
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be the Chief Growth Officer at chess.com, but that's not my story. So I'll rewind a bit to tell that. So my mom studied research in childhood education, and my dad's been a computer engineer his entire career. He's actually retiring this week. So shout out to my dad for 50 great years. And I didn't put the two together until recently, but it actually makes a reasonable amount of sense given my mom and dad that I ended up with this career leveraging technology to help people learn. And so throughout my career, I've worked on products including YouTube, SoFi, Duolingo, Grammarly, and now chess.com. It's a mouthful, but I'm proud to say that these are all home screen apps of mine that I use every day. So regardless whether I'm still there at some of these companies, I definitely want them to succeed, and they've played a meaningful part of my daily habits. And then from a functional perspective, I started out in engineering, then I shifted over to product management, and then eventually over to growth. I don't know that this is necessarily a common career path, but it's very helpful, I guess, to my career to have had the scaffolding, right? Where you start by learning about the code and the engineering perspective, and then you learn about the user from a product management perspective, and then you can learn about how businesses grow, which is broadly what you do in growth. So that's my story. Definitely my career purpose is to help these great products and brands grow so they can become a more positive and meaningful part of people's lives.
Awesome. And I'm really curious about that one part where you mentioned, your mom having worked in childhood education. Was there anything from her work that snuck into your daily life, little snippets of her lessons that you remember to this day?
Yeah, it's a good question. I need to talk to her next time I go back home and and have that conversation. But obviously she raised me, and I think part of what we'll get into with Duolingo and some of those like kind of daily rituals, daily habits, she raised me in the sense that it's very important to, like, the inputs matter a lot, right? Like, do the right thing every day, practice in the right way. Eventually the outcomes will take care of itself. So I think that's just a general mentality and philosophy that I still remember, like, as a kid growing up, and funny to see that play out in some of the products that I've worked on too.
Streaks are such an important mental story. I worked at Snapchat for a bit, and they had big on streaks over there about keeping that connection, keeping that friendship, and little bits that kind of build that overall story. My biggest streaks are a little over a year at Duolingo, and then I have 2,600 something days on Headspace. And there's this thing in mindfulness about like building blocks, right? It's so easy to get lost by this big goal, but if you just show up every single day and do little bit and little bit, and then when you look back, oh, look at all this growth. And it's such an interesting kind of rewire because we're so used to looking at that big overall arc. But if you break it down to, if I just do this and I'm consistent with it, why do you think people struggle so much with this consistency, kind of with that story? Why do people struggle so much to take big goals and break it up? Because I do, for sure.
I do too. No, I mean, it's really hard. And it would certainly be nice if you could get that quick dopamine hit and learn how the pieces move, and suddenly you know how to beat your friend or something, or you learn some basic, like, do 3 lessons on Duolingo and suddenly you expect you can go to some country and speak fluently. It just doesn't work like that in practice, right? And I think, to your point, streaks has become a really powerful gamification mechanic to day by day, right? Feel like you're building something. And we saw at Duolingo very strongly that streaks became a huge part of, like, the identity, right, of the person that was using the product. Very commonly, when people would tell other people that they're using Duolingo, it's always like, what language I'm learning and what is my streak length, right? And we even briefly did some screenshot kind of tracking inside the app to just understand, like, what are these moments inside the product experience where people are just like, they're clearly like screenshotting and texting it to their friends. It was almost always like streak milestones far and away beyond anything else. So yeah, just kind of fascinating. And I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I love what you talked about, that identity piece, right? We're constantly searching for pieces of identities and things we can connect to. And our phone can become such a time suck. I know I'm always looking for ways to be more productive on my phone. And free apps that have really taken over my life recently, Duolingo, the Grammarly keyboard, man, is my favorite thing on earth. And
That's awesome.
then also recently, Kevin and I just got back from Florida. We do this yearly trip with our friends, and Kevin can attest.
He was glued to his phone, yeah.
I was doing chess. I was playing chess on chess.com on the app. Every car ride, anytime we sat. It's so addicted, but it's this thing where all of these pieces, more Duolingo and chess.com, I internalize this idea of like, oh, I'm being productive. Oh, I'm training my brain. I'm doing something worthy of my time versus scrolling through TikTok. What do you think about that story? Like, is it a story that we can kind of get too obsessed with? Like, how do you guys think about that internally when building these companies, trying to make people better?
No, 100%. It's interesting that practically all these companies that I've worked at never really talked internally about like the total addressable market or whatever, right? The competitors for Duolingo and chess.com in many ways are like the Instagrams and TikToks of the world, right? It's like entertainment products more so than, a strict set of language learning or whatever, right? And so, yeah, I would say That's exactly right. Avoiding doom scrolling is important and it's hard.
Mhm.
And a lot of the stories that users tell themselves are ones of personal growth, right? And
Uh-huh.
actually, Duolingo's core founding insight is that the hardest part of learning is motivation. So even from day one, like the core of the product is about habit formation. And you see that deeply embedded into what they do, which now gives them the right to expand and try different subjects as well, right? Because it's not, 100% tailored toward language learning.
And how does that translate to what you're doing at chess.com now? Because to me, the idea is very interesting. It's really interesting that you're obviously applying the gamification mechanics onto this product, but the product itself is also a game.
Yeah.
So how do you gamify a game? Is it similar to what you're doing with language learning, or do you do something different as well?
Yeah, there are both similarities and differences. So one of the differences, if I'll start, is that chess is like inherently more of a competitive game. Like actually playing chess means
Uh-huh.
you're like kind of playing against someone to a degree. And practicing a language is not exactly like that. It doesn't require someone else to lose. And so those dynamics do make some of the kind of product building challenges a little bit differently. But that said, right, I would say like chess has this problematic reputation that it's just like solely a game for intellectual elites, that you need this like extreme photographic memory or you can't excel in it. And that's just not actually accurate. Chess is a skill that takes practice and can be learned by anyone. And that's in many ways just like a language, right? You just have to put in the effort and put in that kind of daily practice, right, to get better and better.
Yeah, and one thing I love about chess.com and that I actually found really fascinating the more I looked into it is it has a lot of legitimacy at almost every level of play, right? There's a lot of new people, there's a lot of people like, oh, chess.com, easy app, what have you. But then you also see like the big chess influence of the world. Like we see like Magnus Carlsen playing on chess.com. You see Hikaru, you see Botes. I'm just naming people so you know I've done it. But and my favorite, Anna Kremlin, you see these people actually using chess.com. And that's such an interesting thing because I don't think we see a lot of platforms where we see the best in the world and the brand new people. How did that come about? Like, why does chess.com maintain this legitimacy in like the highest levels of chess?
Yeah. Well, you could probably tell by the name of the company, chess.com, that, it's
Hmm.
like the
Yeah.
people are very fanatical and passionate about growing the overall game and serving all parts of the community. And a big part of making that successful is to essentially nurture and find talent and show a spotlight on their channels. And so, yeah, we do provide that entire platform for you to learn and play and watch and talk about chess. And we just hope that gives like our members the confidence that they can have this lifelong journey on our platform. We have over 100,000 people that sign up every day, and a lot of them are actually quite beginner, right? But to your point, we also have Magnus Carlsen and top grandmasters that are also enjoying that. And so that can be a challenge in the sense that we're trying to
Mhm.
provide a consistent product and gameplay experience across all. But yeah, I mean, hats off to the team. I'm still relatively new at the company, but 20 years of hard work of building this broad community for everyone in the chess world.
Yeah, and I think that goes down to that authenticity. We talk about this a lot on the show about like authenticity is so important when building a product, when building a brand. And like anyone can slap on chess, anyone can try chess, but like there's such a ingrained like roots in the community. And you are extending and playing on all these influencer stories. And you're taking like these big voices and saying, hey, you want to learn with them, you want to learn from them, come to chess.com, play like they do. You can kind of experience the world almost like they do. And I think that authenticity is so interesting.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We definitely care about introducing the game to like millions of people that otherwise would not have thought about trying chess. And so even beyond these chess endemic creators that you just talked about, we also
Mhm.
invest in like organizing these crossover events. I don't know if you've ever watched like Pog Champs or Blitz Champs on YouTube or Twitch. If not, they're basically these like online amateur chess tournaments where we get, the Mr. Beasts of the world or famous musicians or athletes or, these types of people that like chess, right? But it definitely is
Mhm.
not their main profession, right? But they're happy to raise their hand and participate in this like fun tournament. And then that in turn helps raise awareness of the game of chess to their followers, their subscribers, etc. And that's great for the game.
Yeah. We kind of touched upon this a little bit already, but what would you describe is the typical user story of a player coming onto chess.com? Obviously, it features a wide range of players, but how do you go about crafting that story when you think about growing the product or the platform?
Yeah, our belief is that chess is for everyone and actually
Mhm.
means something different to everyone. So that is one of the big challenges, quite frankly, about working for products or for many products throughout my career that have had such a broad range of user bases. And so one thing that I've leaned on pretty heavily in the growth world is through experimentation, right?
Mhm.
We now have a big enough user base that by investing in the culture and the tooling around high velocity experimentation, we can constantly test, right? Test different product ideas, test different marketing ideas, and then cohort that data so we understand, okay, based on this change to the onboarding user experience, as an example, this is the effect on people that skill level is like they don't know how to move the pieces to someone that is starting to learn to someone that's a grandmaster. And so understanding some of those differences can help us also build user empathy for the changes that we have and how that's affecting their real life user experience. And then on top of that, we do invest in user research in spots that might be more blind spots to the company. So for us at chess.com, naturally, we do have a range of kind of chess players, but for the vast majority, know how to move the pieces, right? And so we invest very intentionally to make sure that we are talking to every single day, people that don't. And we're giving them
Mhm.
prototypes and writing explicit user stories around that persona because that persona is not inherently like the product manager's persona, right? That's like building the feature. So in spots where that's intentional and you're designing for a persona that's not yourself, that's where it really comes into play. Otherwise, we tend to use, frankly, our taste, our intuition, and then our experimentation results to guide the how the product evolves.
This is something so interesting with product in general. I just finished a course at Wharton with Carl Jurek. He wrote a book on product management, and he talks a lot about breaking it down into a lot of interesting story terms, right? Story points and storyboarding. And you mentioned a few words there, kind of zooming out on the role of product. And because so much of this is building empathy with the consumer experience, how much of your role do you believe is storytelling? And how has your role as a storyteller morphed as you've jumped between these companies?
Yeah, I do think it's a big part of it. Something that I've learned is that the storytelling has to be organic to your brand, to your product experience.
Hmm.
You can't just copy and paste some other type of product that your users have a different relationship with onto your own company. It's got to come more organically. Maybe a couple examples I'll just throw out there just to talk through this. So at chess.com, we intentionally chose a pawn as our logo. And that's an intentional choice. It symbolizes the journey from a beginner to a master. And so those that don't play chess that are listening to this, pawns are perceived to be the weakest piece on the chessboard, but they actually become quite powerful, right? As they march down the board and they can be promoted to a queen. And it's the right piece, right? To kind of symbolize that growth that you have in the chess world. And then over on the Duolingo side, if you look at their social media from 5, 10 years ago, it was actually basically language learning testimonials, right? But
Hmm.
actually, the main value proposition of the product is that it's fun and it's quirky, right? And all these things. And they had this character in Duo that was the face of our push notifications. And our users were organically creating memes and content about it on Reddit and Twitter and all these other places. And so the team kind of recognized that and they made an intentional decision to lean heavily into Duo as this character that would create unhinged content on social media and, just leaning in that to go super viral and whatnot. And on certain days, it would even drive 20 or 30% of new users. And so this like storytelling kind of question can be weaved throughout your marketing, your product experience, your brand, like what's your voice? And when it is all consistent, that can really propel growth for your company.
As you talk about chess, it does remind me of a past guest we had, Erin Cushman, and she talked to us about the wine world. It's kind of a similar vibe where it seems very overwhelming. It seems very posh. It seems
Yes.
very like for a certain echelon of the world. When you build chess.com, when you look at growth, how do you balance that between like the best, the grand masters, right? How do you balance their story and kind of serving their need to connect to the community? And these novices, these people who just started, people like me who have a laughable ELO score, how do you balance those stories?
It's not laughable. Actually, I don't know what it is, so maybe it is. No, I'm kidding. Um, No, I was going to say though, like we have to do it intentionally, meaning like we put specific resources on the power user community. We invest in forums, we invest in events, we invest in tournaments. Like we have made a decision at the leadership level that this group of users is important to us. And there's a loop around that, right? Where, beginners, intermediate people see the best of the best and they're aspired, right, to try to become that. And they want to create content. And sometimes the best of the best also like they'll make YouTube channels and they'll create content that teaches people and kind of brings them up. So we see it as an overall ecosystem. Now, that said, one of my biggest priorities on joining the company is to help the company see things in a quantitative manner. And the truth is, I talked about the over 100,000 new users that come onto our platform every day. And just quantitatively, it does skew relatively beginner, right? And so we need to not lose sight of that, even when a lot of the biggest stars and biggest voices in the chess ecosystem tend to be the top end. So I'm not sitting here and saying that it's not a challenge to kind of balance both sides of the extremes, but it works for us because, again, it's a whole ecosystem that builds on top of it.
Yeah, super important. And another interesting kind of contrast between chess.com versus something like a Duolingo is with chess, there's obviously the bigger names and you have the personalities that people subscribe to. And chess itself is a very well-defined games throughout millennia. And chess.com happens to be, the platform where people interact with versus something like a Duolingo where the activity itself is, I would say more or less, less kind of human centric in the sense that you're studying the text, the language. And with a platform like a Duolingo, you have this mascot that grants it personality. So the platform itself actually takes on more of a center stage role here. So how do you envision the brand ethos of chess.com to be compared to something like Duolingo? Would you rather feel like, it blends into the background like a chessboard, or would you rather be something like Duel, who's taken the internet by storm?
It's a good question. I would say that we're still evolving our thoughts around this, but one of the things that I find beautiful about chess.com is that we actually don't own the game of chess. Like there's no underlying IP that we need to have licensing or whatnot, right? And so one of our most important missions is to grow the overall game of chess. And so we don't actually see necessarily that much difference between growing, chess.com and the game of chess. It's all kind of symbiotic. And so to your point about whether we want to blend in the background, I mean, sort of, right? We think of our platform as more of a conduit for people to enjoy chess, as opposed to us always needing to market like chess.com or our specific characters as like the only way to kind of get there. If our content or our puzzles, our news, anything else, it makes people fall in love with chess, then we're doing our job. And we are totally happy for other players like, Duolingo, who now also has a chess course, right, to go enter the market and help grow the game. So again, if the ecosystem is growing, more people are talking about it, more people are enjoying it, that will inevitably be a good thing for our business as well. And so we think about that in that order as opposed to the other way around.
Kind of touch upon Duolingo entering the market. Obviously, you have good familiarity with the two companies. It's something Kevin was kind of getting at is it's two very different approaches, right? With Duolingo, with all of its learning, there's such an investment in the IP, in the characters, and like Oscar, he's teaching you Italian, now he's playing chess with you. Where chess.com is much more like, let's get you in front of a person, or let's use an AI coach of a real influencer. It's much more about the game itself.
I think they're sensible to each company, frankly, right? I think we are fortunate at chess.com to have great relationships with some of the best and brightest and most famous people in the chess world. They play regularly on chess.com. And so because of that, I think that, allows us, right, to surface them, to give a platform, to create the AI coach version of themselves. And so for those that don't actually play on chess.com, the way it kind of works is that you can select one of 10 or 15 coaches. Some of them are fictional, but it also includes, folks like the Botez sisters and Anna Kramling and Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru, some of these names, right? And so when you play a game of chess, at the end of the game, you can review your moves. And so one of these virtual coaches can speak to you and translate, right? Your best moves, your blunders, etc., using the personality of that character. And so it's really delightful. And it's a way that you really couldn't get in real life, frankly, unless you knew these people in person. And so I think that's been a way that has allowed us to make the game much, much more approachable through the lens of an expert. Now, Duolingo has a more broader sense in that their goal is to make learning approachable and fun. And chess is one of those subjects, right? And so they have this set of world characters that for them, strategically, it makes sense that those world characters could then expand across subjects such that they have their own kind of AI virtual coach that can teach you, frankly, anything, a la like ChatGPT or Gemini, right? They don't have like a virtual coach per se, right? But you're working with those tools, right? And you can ask it a broad array of things. So I think that's the direction that they're likely to head in the future.
And I want to kind of double click in the AI coach aspect of chess.com because, obviously AI is a hot button topic. I'm majoring in AI for business. I wouldn't. It's obviously super important in changing the world. And we see a lot of companies go the direction of, okay, AI is important. Let's slap AI. Let's randomly say this is AI now. But what I loved about what I love about chess.com's approach in the AI coach world is that it leans into authenticity, right? You're taking these stories of these different chess grandmasters, all these different experts that you already have a connection with over YouTube, what have you, and you're overlaying it. Can you tell me a little bit about why now to go the AI route?
I mean, we've tried to lean into authenticity from day one, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't think of this as like a now all of a sudden this like massive pivot. So obviously AI is a huge topic right now, as you touched on. But chess and AI, they've been intertwined topics for almost a century, to be honest. And even early computing pioneers like Alan Turing, he built like chess algorithms to test early computer machines before like that was even a thing. And so in the 80s and 90s, computing power grew dramatically. And in 1997, IBM released Deep Blue, which then defeated the world champion back then, Garry Kasparov. And that was like a big watershed moment for AI, deeply unsettling for a lot of people in the chess community and just people at large, right? They're like, oh, now if, computers are smarter than humans, then what's left for humans to do? In today's machine learning, they can create these remarkably powerful chess engines like Stockfish and AlphaZero. It's like a car racing Usain Bolt, right? To a degree. But has chess disappeared? It actually hasn't. It's far from it. It's more popular than ever. And so I think this is like this beautiful story where AI is now able to augment the human understanding of the game and really is providing this like profound improvement in how players learn and train in the game. And essentially the way it works, which is I just talked about it a few minutes ago, is that after you play a game, we're actually running some of these super powerful AI engines. So not LLMs, but things like Stockfish, right? To analyze move by move by move by move, your best moves, your blunders, etc. And then we're translating that over to the LLM side, right? To then give this personality, right? The language and the audio and, in the future animation, right? Such that it feels like this type of coach is actually reviewing your games and then teaching you how to do that. And so we can offer this experience to our over 200 million members on the platform. That's an amazing thing. So I guess if anything, that part is the kind of why now of like, it would have always been amazing to have these virtual characters go and do it, but to allow such a wide breadth of them to exist and for it to feel very human-like, now the technology is there for that to really be magical and effective for the user.
I actually have a question for Gorav here, because on our Uber rides in the past week, I keep hearing you play chess with commentating, which I assume was that AI feature. So how has your experience been playing with, that coaching?
I was just gonna say, Kevin has heard me say, fuck, I've blundered like 8 times in the last week. But no, because I've been doing a lot. I've been using Anna Kremlin as my AI coach for the learnings and also for game review and kind of going back and looking through. I've watched her on YouTube and she just seems like the nicest person, so I picked the nicest one. I'd be scared to do Magnus, to be completely honest, but I like Anna. It's been great. I think it's this thing where it's like I connected with her content on YouTube. I honestly think I got into chess I have no idea why the algorithm gave me chess influences, but then it just kept doing it. Then I'm like, well, I
Yes.
should play. And then I played, and then I started playing on Duolingo and then also chess.com. And then after all that, I finally watched The Queen's Gambit. I want that to be clear. It wasn't the other way around. But I had this connection. It's this thing where you have a connection with someone in the real world, and you like their content, you already enjoy it. So when you add it to something like this, it kind of deepens that story. So I've been enjoying it a lot. I think it's a really cool non-robotic voice. I think it's fun. I think it connects with something I'm already interested in. And it's just an interesting way of a centuries old game.
I appreciate that. Anna is a wonderful person. And yeah, we try to provide a personality that fits everyone, right? And so I think that's the thing. Even with our fictional coaches, we're working to make them more diverse and, have a broader spread, right, of the ways that they interact with you. So that's wonderful. Appreciate you sharing that.
How does that work? Like when you connect with different influencers, how do you have the conversation of like, okay, Anna is different than Andrea. I want to integrate her story, her personality into this AI. What's that conversation like? How do you distill personalities into features of an AI?
Yeah, I mean, we try to integrate them into the process as much as possible, right? So we are essentially leveraging their public content that's already out there, or maybe they will record, right? Some types of phrases or catchphrases with us, that type of stuff, right? That then gets trained into the AI, and then the AI can then translate back what they would say. But it's fun. I just watched a video of Andrea, who you just mentioned, that was like playing a game with her or against her AI bot and then reacting to herself, essentially like coaching herself or playing against herself. So that's pretty meta and surreal to see. But yeah, I mean, they're part of the community in a big way. And we just try to make sure that it really honors their personality in a way that feels authentic to them as well.
And then kind of taking a step back to your role as a product builder. We're similar in the sense that both our entire careers has been in, or for the most part, consumer tech, right? I love consumer tech. Let's talk about, you've run like huge products on huge levels. What does day one look like? When you join a big product with a big user base, obviously you've used the product, you've talked to people, but how do you go in and say, hey, I want to understand the user story? How do you build that empathy that's so important in product?
It's a funny question because I think of day one as like, many years in the making at a lot of these places. Because to your point, these have been products that I've used for many, many, many years before joining the company, and already come to those conversations having an opinion and having been an active user, right, of the company that I'm joining, chess.com being no different from that. And so that helps a ton. I think when that's not the case and you join a company completely cold, especially the consumer world, I highly recommend you should dive very, very deep into the product experience. Sometimes that can be a huge positive in a way. Like I do hire some people where that's not necessarily the case. And I tell them, hey, from day one, your job is to actually record yourself using the product. You have the huge benefit of seeing this with fresh eyes. Please document your thoughts, your emotions, your opinions upon using this type of thing and share it back to the team. For me, though, the passion is so much stronger when I already feel this deep inherent connection with the company that I'm working with. And so I make that a big part of the kind of job prospecting, if you will, right? To ensure that I'm going to a place where I inherently want them to succeed and be as great as possible.
Has there been hidden connections between all these different platforms you've worked on that you don't think people necessarily appreciate? And I'm talking not just some of the more kind of viral ones we've been talking about in terms of chess.com, Grammarly, Duolingo. I'm also talking about, I know you worked on YouTube gaming as a platform. You worked on SoFi, which is, a more of a consumer finance platform. Have there been connections or lessons that carry with you to this day?
Yeah, I think a common element across many of these companies is around the community and around the content angle. I am a very quantitative, experimentation-oriented person. And so I would say earlier in my career, I didn't appreciate this as much as I do now. All these platforms have actively embraced social media, events, social features. These all help bring customer love, and they create these network effects. And a lot of times, its impact is sort of intangible, but it creates such a tailwind, right? Because the users themselves they like it so much, and the companies have always embraced them essentially creating content, right? And spreading the word about it. And so I don't know, I find this earlier in my career just a hard thing to kind of grok and think about how you go build it. But yeah, I would say that's probably the one consistent thread that I probably have not talked about as much myself, because it's not been the part of like each of the company that I kind of manage and own necessarily, but I've grown a tremendous appreciation for the positive effects that can have.
There's a common thread in a lot of these, even I would say Grammarly to an extent, but this idea of fun and play and learning in a fun way for habit formation. And Kevin knows I've ranted about this. We talked about on the show a bit, but it's this idea that somewhere along the way, we decided that fun was for kids, right? And that's one thing I love about chess and chess.com and Duolingo. It's bringing back the fun. It's this idea of like, no, we can have fun. We can play games. How important is it to ingrain fun into products?
Super, super important. Yeah. I think this is one of the misconceptions actually about a lot of these consumer products. Like, they're animated, they're fun, they're delightful. And so you might assume like this is, you know, specifically tailored made toward kids or teenagers or whatnot. But it's actually quite a misconception. Some of the most passionate users across all these products are people in their 80s or 90s or something, right? Like, they choose to improve and evolve themselves and spend their time using a product that is genuinely fun for them, right? And it helps them connect with their family and friends. I would also say fun is a critical ingredient to build a habit, quite frankly. You can have all the best gamification mechanics in the world, but if you're not inherently enjoying the experience, there's so much user choice now, right? Like, not even just the digital world, but the offline world of ways that you could spend your time, right? And so I think increasingly I've seen the power of great design and illustration and animation. That craft helps create fun in the product experience, which then creates, stickiness and habit and learning formation. So without fun as that ingredient, a lot of that gets lost and is broken apart. If you don't know how to move the pieces, we should make sure that you have a delightful way to learn where you try to simplify the game, make sure that the user has developed some confidence in how the pieces move, and then you zoom back out and you try to have them practice it, right? Play a game with a bot or play a game with the coach, like that type of stuff. So we need to provide that scaffolding and that, again, the first day, the first week, such that incrementally you feel like you're developing confidence. You feel like, oh yeah, I can figure this game out, such that by the time you enter the arena or the real world of like growing your ELO rating and playing against live people, you at least have some scaffolded foundation and you've developed some degree of excitement and resilience through that. The way to advancement and progression is often through, the hardships of playing against people, losing some games, analyzing your games, getting better and better and better. But the onus is on us to make sure that that's not like literally step one for the user. If you don't know how to play chess at all, we should give you some delightful on-ramp to, again, learn the pieces, get some confidence, and then go from there.
We have learned so many great stories and insights from you. For our closing segment, we call it Suspenders. And this is where we ask you a fun, random question that's unrelated to anything. And you can give us any answer you feel like. So the question of the day is, if you could delete one everyday inconvenience forever, what's gone?
Wow. One everyday inconvenience. The first thing that comes to mind, so I have 2 little kids and I work mostly, so I'm in California, I work mostly with people in Europe. And so I love, love, love the morning time with the kids, but sometimes, man, I start meetings at 7 a.m. or even earlier. And so that really like crosses with the kids kind of getting up. So I think I got to figure out what to do in that one particular hour of every day. I think that's the hardest thing for me right now in my stage of life. But yeah, the kids are awesome and just part of growing up and working hard.
I don't think I knew this. Is chess.com a European company?
No, we are global and we're remote, but yeah, we're spread all around the world. So yeah. I start pretty early because I'm on the West Coast.
I will say this is also one thing I do love about chess, and I see this a lot with chess.com, is that when you start a game and you're connected with someone, the geographies, 2 people speaking totally different languages playing the same game. So when you see a name in like Sanskrit or you see a name in Mandarin, you're like, wow, that's just such an interesting connection across the world.
Totally. We have this feature called Passport. So I don't know, when you play a game, you could see the flag of your opponent. And every time you play someone in a country and you've never played someone in that country before, you collect that flag. So it's almost like an achievement system. And it's one of the most shareable and most liked features in our entire product. So yeah, to your point, chess is really played around the world, and it is very, very fun. And also shout out to the engineering team for building like real-time gameplay system that spans across the world. And it's not easy by any means.
That's awesome. And that's storytelling, right? So much of product, so much of consumer, so much of your role is understanding the user story, connecting with the user story, building empathy with it. And this is just one form of storytelling. But we really, really appreciate your time. We learned so much. Again, I love all of your products, like obsessed with Grammarly, obsessed with Duolingo, have this new obsession with chess.com. You have taken over so much of my life. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. This was really fun to do.
Welcome back to Top Hat. This is the part of the episode where we dissect and analyze some of the epic and awesome learnings we got from this week's expert storyteller. In this episode, we had someone really, really cool. We had someone who's built and worked on products that have dictated so much of my life, from Duolingo,
and a lot of people's.
From Duolingo to Grammarly to chess.com. These are free apps that I use daily now. Free apps that are a huge part of my screen time. And like, I'm still really, really bad at chess. Like, look me up. My ELO score is embarrassing, but I'm playing pretty much every day and I see myself getting better. It does remind me a lot about life. When you play a game of strategy like this, you can see ways that it helps in life. You can see the stories you're learning from chess, whether it's I start really strong and I'm feeling good, but then I get cocky and I move too fast. And sometimes you focus too much on protecting your queen and you forget that your pawn can win here. Like, you can win with any piece.
And something that's very admirable that chess.com is doing is that they are in a way revamping the brand story of chess, because for the longest time, and even now when you bring up this game to people, it can be very intimidating because we conventionally think that it's a game for very, very smart people. Like, yes, you can learn how the pieces move, but that feeling of defeat is not always enjoyable. But for chess.com to be able to gamify a 1,000-year-old game, which sounds funny to say out loud, but is allowing beginners to start somewhere and stay consistent and build day by day so that you can make real progress. And as you're describing, really take a lot more away from just the game itself. And it actually reminds me of our episode with Aaron Kirschman, the wine tasting editor and instructor. Obviously, it's not to endorse the consumption of alcohol, but we talked about how the wine industry was in dire need of a new brand story, because over time it has built up this threshold for younger people and the people who are not deep into the knowledge of just wine tasting in general, right? But in the example of chess, they have found a way to successfully break down that barrier for a lot of people and achieve growth, obviously, for the platform, but also to introduce this game and keep it alive and still growing.
Mm-hmm. There's something amazing about when I'm playing and it shows me someone whose name's in a different script and whose flag is from a different country. We don't speak the language. We couldn't communicate if we saw each other, but we are playing chess. We are having kind of a communication. And that's kind of the cool thing about influencers like this, about what chess.com's doing. It's making this iconic game accessible and finding another way to connect different cultures.
Yeah, it's good UI and user journey design. It makes you feel like this game is taking you places and it's allowing you to connect with people. And that's obviously a great way to develop your story as a user to the platform and as a player.
Yeah. Try to make things fun. Try to make your story fun. Try to make it entertaining. It's something we talk about a lot on the show, is that your audience owes you nothing. right? You don't get bonus points for doing something boring and hard. And that's kind of what chess felt like before I got into it. No, it's fun. It's exhilarating. It's cool to see things you didn't see before. It sucks when you move a piece and you're excited about it and you didn't realize you just exposed your queen. It's fun to sit back and watch and like review your game when you're like, I didn't even see that checkmate coming. That's the whole ball game, and that's one of the essential parts about storytelling is find ways to make your story more fun.
And this has been another great episode of the Linen Suit and Plastic Tie podcast. Thank you again, Albert, for sharing your great journey and the stuff that you're doing on our platform so we can help celebrate it. For those of you listening, if you liked listening and watching us, subscribe wherever you've seen or heard us. Follow us on Instagram at LSPTpod, also on TikTok of the same name, and LinkedIn, Linen Suit and Plastic Tie.
We really appreciate you riding with us. We know there's been some gaps. We've been a little bit slow with the episodes this year. Adapting to a new city, adapting to a new school has taken its toll, but we are not done. We have barely scratched the surface. In this day and age, storytelling is even more important than ever before, and we're excited to bring you more storytellers to help you unlock the power of storytelling in your everyday lives. See you next time. We appreciate you. Have an amazing day.
Linen Suit